What's up, Green Bay Packers fans? Welcome back, and as always, thank you for joining me. My name's Paul Brettel, I'm the site editor over at Dairyland Express, where we cover the Packers, Brewers, Bucks, and Badgers. I also have a new article out every Monday and Friday over at Cheesehead TV. And as it says at the bottom of the screen here, you can find me on Twitter at Paul_Brettel. So it's game day. It is Saturday, the final Green Bay Packers preseason game before the week off and then the regular season kicks into full effect. So what I wanted to cover today, hopefully you're able to watch this before the game takes place. It's an early one, noon Central Time against the Buffalo Bills. But what I wanted to cover today was an article I had over at Cheesehead TV on Friday, where it was basically just a brain dump of everything that I'll be watching, keeping an eye on, players, positional battles, you name it, I probably covered it. So it's just in a bullet point format, the actual article version. Check it out. But I wanted to discuss some of those, or a majority of those items that I went through today, as something to, like I said, keep our eyes on moving forward. So let's dive in. First up, let's start with the offensive line. There's a lot to unpack here. We all know about the battle for the guard position. And Thursday morning, when meeting with reporters, Matt LaFleur gave us a little bit extra insight. So our perception up until that point was that Royce Newman, Ben Braden, Lucas Patrick, and John Runyon were the four battling for the two guard openings. However, Matt LaFleur, when discussing the guard position, left Ben Braden's name off the list. So it's Runyon, Patrick, and Royce Newman battling for those two spots. If I had to guess right now, I think week one, Royce Newman's going to be the right guard. Lucas Patrick is going to be the left guard. And I'm going to go off on a little tangent here on Lucas Patrick. I wrote a full article version on Lucas Patrick over at Dairyland Express on Thursday. I know that he's a name who's come up as a possible cut or trade candidate. The Green Bay Packers, they do have good interior defensive line or offensive line depth. It is young, but they do have good depth. And if they trade Patrick, they can, of course, get someone in return or a draft pick, most likely. They can also save almost $2 million in cap space. So the 53-man roster decision has to be made this coming Tuesday. If Patrick's traded before then or left off of it for cap purposes, I'm not going to be completely shocked. With that said, I hope that that's not the decision that the Green Bay Packers make. Last season, we saw how important offensive line depth was. All the injuries that this line sustained, 9 different players took snaps along the offensive line. Several of those players played at least 2 and sometimes even 3 positions. Yet, regardless of the injuries, the movement that took place, this was still, by pressures allowed, sacks allowed, ESPN's metrics, PFF's metrics, the best or very close to the best offensive line unit in football last season. Lucas Patrick, even as a backup, let's say he does not win the starting job, he can play both guard positions as well as center. He has plenty of NFL experience. And when you are potentially relying on 2 rookies, Josh Myers and Royce Newman, starting on your interior offensive line for a team that has Super Bowl aspirations, not a bad idea to have a veteran to lean on. So even in getting a draft pick, cap savings, to me, it's not worth it. There's no such thing as too much offensive line depth, and we don't see bad offensive lines winning Super Bowls. So I hope that they hang on to Lucas Patrick for those reasons just discussed. So that was my little tangent that I wanted to go on there. But keep our eyes on the guard position. Obviously, as we have, it's between Runyon, Patrick, and Royce Newman for those 2 spots. Newman and Patrick have gotten a bulk of the first team starting reps during practice this week, although Runyon has been circulated in as well. But the starting 2 so far have been Patrick and Newman. So something to keep our eyes on. So what does that mean for Ben Braden? Well, not good. Because if we think, the reason that he's not included is the obvious, that the 3 players mentioned already have performed better at guard than what he has. So then when David Bakhtiari is back and Elton Jenkins is inside, now Ben Braden's the 5th option at guard. That's not good either in terms of keeping your job. So he's going to have to impress at tackle. He played all 62 of his snaps last week against the Jets at right tackle, and he fared pretty well. He gave up 2 pressures, but on that Kylan Hill touchdown run, you'll see there was Ben Braden on the edge sealing. So it was a well done block on his part there. So he found some success. But that brings us into the real big question, I guess the second big question on this offensive line. What do the Packers do at backup tackle? Josh Nijman has been the primary left tackle during this preseason. It was a rough outing against Houston. He did play much better against the Jets. Practice this week, he took some first team reps at both left tackle and right tackle. Then don't forget about Dennis Kelly. He's been out injured the last week and a half. I think many of us assumed when the Green Bay Packers signed him that he was going to be the swing tackle on this team, but he's still injured. And I don't know this for certain, but I doubt he's going to play on Saturday since he hasn't practiced all week. So what do they do with him? Then there's Cole Van Lanen, the rookie, who's played both guard and tackle. And then, of course, Ben Braden in that mix. So the Green Bay Packers are going to have some tough decisions to make along that. If we assume, and again, I'm going to assume that Lucas Patrick is on the team, there are 7 spots pretty much locked up. Bakhtiari, Jenkins, Turner, Myers, Newman, Patrick, and Runyon. That's 7 players. Typically, most NFL teams keep 9 offensive linemen. However, the Green Bay Packers may choose to go with 10. If they choose to go with 9, they have to choose 2 of Cole Van Lanen, Josh, Braden, and Dennis Kelly. So what do you do in that situation? What I'm predicting is going to happen is that Dennis Kelly is going to make the active roster, and then he's going to be placed on injured reserve. The reason teams place a player on the active roster and then injured reserve is because they can come back, as we've seen with Devin Funchess, with Will Redmond, a couple other guys. If you go on injured reserve before the 53-man roster comes out, that player cannot return. However, with the new, more flexible injured reserve rules, you can have as many players come back as you want off IR throughout the season. I believe it's only a 3-week stint, so it's much shorter than what it used to be as well. So if they put Kelly on the active roster, move him to IR, that opens up a spot where I'm going to guess Josh is on the roster. He was on the roster last season as well. And then if they keep 9 offensive linemen, they'll have to choose between Braden and Van Lanen. My guess between those two is that they'll choose Ben Braden. I think Van Lanen, really like him, obviously as a former Wisconsin Badger as well, but I think that he could benefit from a year on the practice squad. Very good run blocker, could beef up his pass protection, and also just add some functional strength as well. And going to slide off on another tangent here, but when we think about players, because we all have that 1 player, 2 players who we worry about making it to the practice squad after they're cut, keep in mind that if another NFL team wants to claim one of the cut players from the Packers, for example, they have to put them on the active roster. So they can't just pick up a player and say, oh, we want him on our practice squad. He has to go on the active roster and stay on the active roster. So that's why that really doesn't happen as often as I think some folks think, because are like Cole Van Lanen, for example, he's taken 60 preseason snaps. Have you seen enough from him to boot someone off of your own 53-man roster? I mean, in most instances, teams aren't comfortable enough to make that decision. So just something to keep in our mind as these roster cuts come. So if they keep 10, Dennis Kelly goes to IR, then they can keep Josh, Braden, and Cole Van Lanen. However, if they choose to keep 9, Josh and Braden are my choices. Van Lanen to the practice squad, and I still think Dennis Kelly is going to go to IR. I don't know the severity of his injury whatsoever, but something that is telling, reading the tea leaves here, is that if the Green Bay Packers were just ready to move on from him, he would have been placed on IR already. They did it with Will Redmond. They did it with Devin Funchess. With Kelly still not being on IR, the Green Bay Packers, once the roster cuts come down, they're going to put him on the roster. It's just, is he going to be ready to go week 1? And they're going to have some other difficult decisions to make, or is he going to head to IR at that point? So the tackle position is kind of flown under the radar, the backup tackle position, I should say, compared to the starting interior offensive line, understandably so. But there's some decisions to make there. Cole Van Lanen, Josh, Ben Braden, and Dennis Kelly fighting for 2, maybe 3 spots between them. So just in general, keep our eyes on that offensive line. Next up, let's discuss the wide receiver position. With Devin Funchess out of the picture, it seems pretty well set. As I said before, I was more open to listening to the idea of 7 receivers, but I never thought that it was going to happen. Just too many pass catchers on this team. The receivers that they have, Devontae Adams, Randall Cobb, they're going to get a ton of targets. Lazard, MVS, the tight ends, Tanyan Lewis, DeGuara, Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon out of the backfield. Plenty of pass catching options. You do not need a 7th receiver on this team. With Funchess, it was really between if they were going to keep 6, between Funchess and Malik Taylor. I do think they're going to keep 6, not 5 for the special teams purposes that Malik Taylor provides. But this just seems now like it's pretty much over. This is Malik Taylor's job. Juwan Winfrey's been injured the last few weeks. Reggie Begelton that hasn't shown enough. And then Equinemius St. Brown, he's been injured. And then when on the field, he's made some plays here and there. But again, nothing to really stand out. Not like Taylor has in the preseason games. And again, we circle back to special teams where Equinemius St. Brown, I think he has only 50 career snaps in his 2 full seasons that he's played. Remember, he missed all 2019 with an injury, whereas Malik Taylor took 210 special team snaps in 2020 alone. So wide receiver 6, assuming the Packers keep 6, seems pretty cut and dry at this point, belonging to Malik Taylor. Jordan Love. We should see Jordan Love today, at least as of the time that I'm recording this. Matt LaFleur, the Green Bay Packers, have not officially acknowledged that, but when they cut Jake Dogala, the 4th quarterback on this roster on Friday, that told us he was going to play, because if Love's not going to play, Kurt Benkert's the only quarterback that they have on the roster who is going to suit up. So obviously you can't do that. So Jordan Love is going to play, and something to keep our eyes on. He had a very encouraging debut against the Houston Texans. However, one of the critiques from both Matt LaFleur, Luke Getsy, and Nathaniel Hackett was that they want to see Jordan Love, as LaFleur put it, let that sucker rip. Now, that doesn't mean be reckless, of course. It doesn't mean just throw it downfield for the sake of throwing it downfield. He still needs to go through his progressions. He still needs to make sure his footwork is solid. That's going to lead to more accuracy. What that means is the Texans' defense that game was very, very vanilla. As LaFleur pointed out, they played either man or Tampa 2. And for Jordan Love as a quarterback in those basic defenses, exactly where to attack on the field. But we still saw some hesitancy from him. And so what LaFleur, Hackett, what they mean by that is trusting what you see, knowing what the defense is doing, and knowing where to attack, and not being as cautious as he was. With that said, this was a quarterback making his NFL debut. This is to be expected. This is nothing, major. This is not a red flag whatsoever. But let's keep our eyes on this Buffalo game to see if we see a more decisive Jordan Love back there, because I know that that's been an area of emphasis just based on what LaFleur and Hackett's comments were after the Houston game, because they both said it as pretty much the big thing that they'd like to see from Jordan Love moving forward. So can he be more assertive in making those throws and in his decision making, really? I mean, he threw the ball confidently once he threw the ball, but can he do so, be assertive, attack the defense in those soft spots? And this Buffalo defense is going to be more difficult than Houston. One, from the sounds of it, we don't know how long, but they're going to play a lot of their starters. So there's going to be many players on this Packers offense that are fighting for just a roster spot going up against some Buffalo Bills starters on the defense. And defensively, they're also going to throw a lot more at Jordan Love than what the Houston Texans did. So it's going to be a really good test. If Love goes out there and does struggle, I mean, to some degree, this should be expected. One, he's been out injured. He did return to practice this week, but he missed a preseason game. And he's going out there with backups. And he's going up against a starting defense. We'll see for how long. Might only be one drive, might only be a quarter. But at some proportion of that game, he's going to go up against a starting defense. And this is a very good defense on a team that has Super Bowl aspirations. So if Love goes out and struggles, don't be surprised whatsoever. But the big thing to look for on top of, hey, is he going through his progressions? Is his footwork solid? Is he being assertive? Is he attacking the defense? Something to watch for. Another thing to watch for is the snap counts. Last week was a prime example of this. So week 1 of the preseason, Oren Burks puts on a show. I assume the rest of you are like me. You're all excited to see him against the New York Jets, but he's only out there for 12 defensive snaps. So what does that tell me? It tells me Oren Burks is on this 53-man roster. While the rest of us wanted to see him duplicate that performance between practices, that game, maybe his just overall experience, which I know is limited, especially when it comes to the regular season. The Packers had seen enough. They only needed him on the field for 12 snaps, and they said, Burks, you're done. I want to take a look at these guys now. So to me, that said, he's going to be on this 53-man roster. And then when Kamal Martin was cut earlier this week, that just reiterated that. So keep an eye on snap counts. Is there someone who's fighting for a roster spot, but is not on the field, for they're only on the field for the first quarter? Because that's very telling in this situation. So keep your eyes on that. Someone who needs a big game, two in particular who were on the roster last year. One, Sternberger. He is suspended for the first 2 games of this season. And I'll be honest, leading up to training camp, I thought once the suspension's up, they'll put him on the 53-man roster. They'll have to make a tough decision in removing someone, but he'll be on. I'm not so sure at this point. Either if he's on, if he's off, I'm not going to be surprised either way. But this is his last game to really show that he's deserving of a roster spot. The part of me that says that they'd keep him is because, as I've discussed in here before, he only has 1 year of experience at the tight end position in college. It's a very, very difficult position to transition to from college to the NFL. He only has 300 career NFL snaps. So combine all that together, and he was a 3rd-round pick entering his 3rd season. It still seems too early to pull the plug and say we've seen enough. But we've seen, especially this summer, that Goody is not afraid to move on from draft picks if that's what he feels is best for the team. And Sternberger has to go out and show consistency. Justin Outen, the part of why I feel that, or the reason why I feel that it's so much more in play that he could be cut at this point, is because after that first preseason game, we know Sternberger caught that big play up the seam from Jordan Love that sparked that touchdown drive. Justin Outen, the tight ends coach, was asked about that after the game, pretty much just disregarded it and went straight to, we need to see consistency from Sternberger. Needs to have a better understanding of the playbook. I mean, it's his 3rd season in this LaFleur offense, and still your position coach calling you out for not having the best understanding of your responsibilities within the playbook. I mean, that's not a good sign at all. So we need to see a consistent performance here. Good hands, helpful, reliable as a pass blocker in the blocking game. We know how important that is to the tight end position in this LaFleur offense, or just in general. So Sternberger really needs to put on a good performance here and show that 3 weeks from now or 4 weeks from now, when it's week 3 of the NFL season, that he's worthy of a roster spot, because he's not going to unseat DeGuara, Lewis, and Tunyon. And Dominique Daphne's taken a lot of special team snaps, so I don't even know if they're going to if he would be able to unseat him. And then you get to the question of, are the Green Bay Packers going to keep 5 tight ends? That's a lot of tight ends. And then who are you going to kick off the roster in his space? So some difficult decisions that have to be made by Green Bay. Sternberger can certainly help his case here today against the Buffalo Bills. The other player on the hot seat, Tyler Lancaster. I'm not sure if he's going to play or not. I'm pretty sure he was back at practice on Tuesday, which I thought for him was a good sign. I actually came out with my 53-man roster prediction, and I put him on over Jack Heflin. My logic, my reasoning was, this is a team that's all in, and they're going to go with experience in Tyler Lancaster and knowing who he is. No, he's not spectacular by any means, but they know who he is. They know what they're going to get from him. The day after I published that, that's one that I would go back and switch. I think Jack Heflin's going to get that roster spot. As Jerry Montgomery, the defensive line, talked about, they're very similar players. And if Heflin's on the roster, our expectation shouldn't be that he's going to come in and help, just be a game changer on this defensive front. That's not the case whatsoever. Montgomery even compared him to Tyler Lancaster. They're very similar. They're better run defenders than pass blocker or pass rushers. High effort, do the dirty work type of player. So, but Heflin has shown great effort, and that's obviously really important. But you want to see these great effort, good intelligence on the defensive front. There was that screen play against the Jets, a good recognition. Quick got out of his stance, found the running back, made the shoestring tackle to bring him down at around the line of scrimmage. He has 8 tackles, which is the most among the defensive front. He has 2 pressures. So I think at this point it's Heflin's job, especially if Lancaster can't go on Saturday. And he didn't practice on Thursday, which is not a good sign for him. The safety position, Henry Black, he's going to be the third safety on this team. He's played the best of this group, obviously minus Adrian Amos and Darnell Savage. And I think that Vernon Scott is pretty close to a roster lock as well. But he could be in a similar position to Dennis Kelly. I don't know the severity of his injury, but he's potentially someone who could be on the initial 53-man roster and then placed on IR, which would open up an extra spot at the safety position if we're under the assumption that they keep 5, which is what they did a year ago. Because right now, that 5th spot is a toss-up, honestly, between Innis Gaines and Christian Uphoff. If the Packers choose Gaines, I get it. If they choose Uphoff, I get it. They're both young players. We've seen the missed tackles, the ups and downs, but they've both flashed on defense. They've both flashed on special teams. And from the outside looking in, where the Green Bay Packers rank those two, I'm not sure. And whichever one they choose, like I said, I'll get it. I'm not going to argue about it. But one thing to keep in mind, special teams. Innis Gaines, according to Pro Football Focus, has 32 special team snaps this summer, while Christian Uphoff has 18. So we'll see how that plays out today, but just something to keep our eyes on. And again, maybe this is all a moot point. If Vernon Scott makes the roster, heads to IR, then they can keep both of them for the time being until Vernon Scott returns. Like the 5th safety, the 4th edge rusher position is up for grabs. And again, it's going to come down to special teams. Special teams is the theme of the preseason because it decides these final roster spots, as we've discussed on here before. So there's Chauncey Rivers, Tipa Galaya, and Jonathan Garvin battling for that 4th spot. Mike Smith, the outside linebackers coach, was very candid with reporters a few weeks ago saying it's going to be special teams play that determines that 4th edge rusher role. He also recently had some very high compliments of Jonathan Garvin as a pass rusher on the defensive side of the ball. He also had some high praise for Tipa, I think it was a week or 2 weeks ago as well, saying that if he can add 10 pounds, become a special teams contributor, that he's going to be a force in this league. He really likes what they have in Tipa. But going back to Garvin, he also noted that a big reason, or the biggest reason, that Garvin didn't see playing time in 2020 was because of special teams play. So how much has he improved in that phase, and is it enough for him to claim that 4th edge rusher role? Chauncey Rivers, he's the most unknown of these guys. He was claimed off waivers a week or two into the preseason. And again, we're going to go back to special team snaps here. He has 20 this preseason, while Galaya and Garvin have 15. So it's close, but Rivers still has the edge. Again, we'll see how that plays out. This is kind of like the 5th safety, where I really see this being a toss-up. I know Garvin and Tipa are the well-known names, but I think Rivers is in that mix as well. Since he's gotten to Green Bay, he seemed to have made a play or two every practice so far. So just another position, another group of guys to keep our eyes on as they battle for that 4th spot. Linebacker. How many linebackers do the Packers keep? 4 or 5. I'm going to throw Oren Burks into the Devondre Campbell, Chris Barnes grouping of they're safe. What I mentioned earlier, he only played 12 snaps last week. That's kind of my clue in what I'm, reading tea leaves here, what we're going off of. But that 4th spot, is it Ty Summers, Isaiah McDuffie, or a name to keep our eyes on who hasn't been brought up a lot? Ray Wilborn. Wilborn was signed to a futures deal last January. He was an undrafted rookie in 2020. Didn't spend the 2020 season with any team during the regular season, so that's why he was signed to a futures deal. Still technically is a rookie, but he is taking the 8th most special team snaps this season, and he has the 4th highest special teams grade among the Packers in Pro Football Focus, so something to keep our eyes on. Isaiah McDuffie, I think he took 15 special team snaps against the Jets, 2nd most on the team, but he's missed most of training camp on the NFI list. Especially as a 6th-round rookie, can he show enough in that limited time to show that he's deserving of a roster spot, or is he going to end up on the practice squad? And then there's Ty Summers, who, we know who he is as a defensive player, can be helpful against the run, but not someone you want on the field in coverage situations. And then a reliable special teams player as well. So the Green Bay Packers keep 4. they're going to have to choose between Summers, McDuffie, and Wilborn at that point. If they go with 5, obviously they'll be able to keep 2 of the 3. If I had to guess right now, I would lean on Summers with the experience. Wilborn, just a very raw prospect still. He's flashed. We've seen that potential, that athleticism, but still a raw prospect. McDuffie, I think he's missed too much time being on the non-football injury list. So if they're only keeping 4 and I had to guess, I'm going to go with experience. Once again, leaning on the fact that this is an all-in team. They're going to take, or my assumption is, they're going to take what they know over the unknown at this point, especially on the back end of the roster players. Cornerback. Do the Packers keep 6 or 7 cornerbacks? We know the 5 guys who are locks. Jair Alexander, Kevin King, Shannon Sullivan, John Charles, and Eric Stokes. We know they're locks. I'm not going to quite call KB and Ento a lock, but I think he's very, very close. He missed a tackle or 2 against the New York Jets, but on special teams, he's been the gunner. Practice, preseason, family night, the dude just flashes that playmaking ability, come away with interceptions, pass breakups. He's seen more reps with the starting defense. So I won't quite Sharpie him in, but I'm definitely going to pencil him in. And I don't think we've seen enough whatsoever from Isaac Yiadom, to who the Packers acquired from the New York Giants in the Josh Jackson trade, to sit here and say that he's going to beat out KB and Ento. Really, the thing that Yiadom has going for him is the draft pedigree. We know how much of a factor that plays in the NFL. He is a former 3rd-round pick. He also has a wealth of special teams experience, having played nearly 500 snaps. But I don't think that's enough to beat out KB and Ento. However, I do think that those are 2 reasons why the Green Bay Packers could choose to keep 7 cornerbacks. So this is a big week for Yiadom to prove that he's deserving of a roster spot. And they kept 6 cornerbacks last year as a reference, but I certainly wouldn't rule it out, especially with the special teams value that he brings, because having to choose between him and KB and Ento, not a decision I want to have to make, but if I'm going to, I'm choosing Ento. But you could lose some good special teams ability with Yiadom. So I certainly think keeping a 7th quarterback is in play. Lastly, to round this discussion out, J.K. Scott, can we please see some consistency? You cannot, as a punter, have a 21-yard punt in an NFL game, like at all. You can't do that in a college game. Your high school coach would be mad at you if you had a 21-yard punt. In a regular season game, if there's a 21-yard punt like that in the second half, that could be a reason that you lose. It could be the reason that you lose that game. We can't have that inconsistency. I wouldn't rule out the Green Bay Packers making a move at punter. Doesn't mean it's going to be in this next week. But if we get to 6 months from now, it's January, and J.K. Scott hasn't been the Packers punter for 2 months, I'm also not going to be surprised whatsoever. In terms of who's out there, that's a great question. Head over to Packer Report. There's a really, really well-done article by Mark Eckel where he covered the teams, a few of the teams that have 2 punters on their roster right now, because obviously they're not going to keep 2 punters, and went through some of the options that the Packers might have at cutdown time if they want to move on from J.K. Scott. But just because J.K. Scott is the only punter on this roster right now, I still wouldn't rule out him being replaced at some point. So everyone, that's my list. There's a lot to watch. There's going to be a lot to keep our eyes on. It's the 3rd preseason game. We're going to see a lot of those back end of the roster guys, but it's still exciting because there are still a number of roster decisions that have to be made. So enjoy the game. Thank you for tuning in. I'll see you guys soon. As always, take care, stay safe, and go Pack Go.